Welcome to Anime Recapped. In this video, we will explain Osama ranking. This anime tells a story of a prince born deaf and has a very weak physique. The people of the kingdom look down on the young prince Bojji, who can neither hear nor speak. They call him the useless prince, unlike his brother Data, who is very strong and was groomed to govern from birth, having been born with everything his brother lacked. Even though he was the second born, he was praised and openly spoken about as King Boss's successor from an early age. Naturally, this made Data arrogant, and he was one of the many people in the kingdom who openly mocked Bojji. Despite his arrogant demeanor, Data is a fair-minded and clever young man who has gradually evolved as a result of the tragedies that have befallen him in the future. Our main protagonist, Prince Bojji, rightful owner of the throne, is extremely hard-working and sincere, which often draws people to him even if they cannot always understand him. As the first child, Prince Bojji fought hard to inherit his father's throne and want to become the greatest king in the world. However, his people doubted his ability, saying that he could not even use a child's sword. Well, Osama ranking is set in a time when every king who leads a kingdom will be ranked based on certain characteristics. So, what defines a king? Are his subjects productive and prosperous? And most importantly, does he wield the power of a hero with all your capacity? This anime focuses on a boss kingdom led by King Boss obsessed with becoming stronger. Boss traveled far and wide to find new challenges for himself, was one of the strongest kings in his era who managed to rank 7th among the strongest kings. Unfortunately, King Boss began to fall ill in his old age, and it was predicted that his life would not be any longer, so the king is required to immediately appoint which prince will be the heir to the royal throne. King Boss has two sons named Bojji and Data. Bojji is the son of his first wife who has died while saving his beloved son, the rightful heir to the throne Bojji, and Data, the son of his second wife named Hilling. Many in the Boss Kingdom do not want Prince Bojji to be the heir to the throne, preferring Data to take his place. One day Bojji was playing on the hill when he met Kagi, a shadowy creature that could speak. Kagi approached Bojji with the intention of robbing his possessions. He is a member of a shadow clan capable of murder and deeply loyal to their master they have chosen. Bojji gives him his clothes and agrees to return with more expensive clothing. Bojji repeats the process of wearing expensive clothes, traveling to meet Kage. After several days, Kage began to take a special interest in Bojji and follows him secretly as he walks back to the castle barely clothed. Then he is scolded by his stepmother Hilling for walking around naked. She claims he lacks the characteristics of an heir to the throne. Hilling tells Damash not to translate it because he believes Bojji will not understand without it. She don't know Bojji can read lips and looks very hurt. King Boss, who was well aware that Bojji was frequently misunderstood throughout the kingdom, he inquires about his public nudity. Then he attempted to make Bojji appear more authoritative by giving Bojji sword training with one of the royal sword master Damash. Damash, frustrated by his inability to teach Bojji, takes his rage out on training equipment. Data approaches and inquires about Bojji's progress. He claims Bojji isn't prepared, but he accepts to fight Data instead. He notices that Data has a similar aura as King Boss when they raise their poles to each other. When Data tackles him, he is impressed, but he swiftly overpowers him and knocks him to the ground. Data grows enraged and refuses to assist him. Bojji senses Damash's admiration for his swordsmanship and dares Data to a duel. Data and Bojji have a fight. Despite the might of Data's strikes, he is unable to hit Bojji, who effortlessly dodges his attacks. When Bojji succeeds in striking back, his blows are weak and have little effect on Data. His ability to escape attack has made a lot of people impressed. After fighting Data, Bojji, who was badly injured and had injuries to his legs and arms, Kage, who had always covertly followed Bojji, tried to console him when he cried in his bed. Bojji is very happy that someone is on his side and thus began the friendship of Kage and Prince Bojji. Scene changes and we witness the backstory of Kage's clan. The Shadow Clan was wiped out when Kage was a child. Allegedly after their lord was assassinated, clan members are impaled with spears as young Kage and his mother run through the city streets. Soldiers follow them as they leave outside of town. and Kage's mother tells him to proceed to the poison forest. Kage and his mother are exposed after a member of the Light Clan casts a spell that brightens the region. As Kage flees, she tries to stall them, but he mocks her, saying that their dispersed force has most likely already caught him. They stab her to death and go out to find Kage. As King Boss passes away, the day of reckoning arrives. Prince Bojji is pointed to by a weird devil-like entity who laughs maniacally. After then, the new king would be chosen in accordance with the late king's wishes. During the letter hearing, Data was shocked and couldn't believe that his father preferred Bojji over him. Data, who was disappointed with King Boss' choice, then rebelled against the magic mirror that King Boss had given him when he was younger. According to the magic mirror, Data didn't need to be concerned, because the kingdom will still choose him as the next heir to the throne in the end. Because everyone feels Bojji is a failure in every manner, the kingdom would nevertheless choose him as the next heir to the throne. Her forecast turned out to be correct. Data was chosen as the king of the boss's nation after Hilling and all of the royal commanders revolted to replace Bojji with Data. Bojji was heartbroken and upset by the choice. Bin, one of the 4 knights, notifies Bojji that Kage has gone to roam in the woods. Recognizing that his best friend has vanished, Bojji chooses to venture out into the world in quest of Kage. Bojji asks Hilling to go on a journey, but she says no. She orders her guards from stopping him from leaving, but he attempts to climb out of the window. Hilling agrees to let Bojji visit her parents with Dormas and Hokuro. Bojji is on his way to see Hilling's parents, accompanied by his swordmaster Damaz and the knight Hokuro. Back in Boss's kingdom, the official ranker for the ranking of kings arrives to assess Data. While the magic mirror continues to have a negative impact on the young king, Data has assigned Damaz the responsibility of assassinating Bojji after the magic mirror persuaded the younger brother that it is important to prevent a possible coup. Damaz, on the other hand, is a traditionalist who feels that obeying orders from a few days old king who is also a child is the right and proper thing to do. He tosses Bojji into a massive, blazing pit in the earth that is known as the gateway to hell. Damaz is well aware that he has behaved in a disgusting approach. He cuts off his own hand as punishment for throwing Bojji into hell, and he only uses the blunt side of his blade to knock out Hokuro. Kage, on the other hand, hasn't been far from Bojji the entire time. In fact, he's been hiding in his purse since Bevan gave him the mission to do so during their dungeon encounter. Kage explains that there's a man just at the bottom of the gate to hell, and he's going to make Bojji powerful. Data, on the other hand, was desperate to acquire more power, so he followed the advice of the magic mirror and drew power from King Boss's frozen corpse, which will be used to create a magic elixir that will make Data as powerful as King Boss. Oppies, who places a high value on his king's service. It's the reason for his plan to assassinate Data and restore Bojji on the throne in order to honor the late King Boss's order. But Oppies is easily persuaded by the figure in the mirror, Lady Miranjo. He seemed to be afraid of her, but she convinces him to help her in what can only be described as a magical drink. Data felt full again at the last second and decided to throw the potion away. Oppies and Miranjo knock Data out and force-feed him the rest of his father's corpse. Suddenly smoke burst out of nowhere, knocking Bojji and Kage out. Several troops from the Underworld Kingdom delivered Bojji and Kage to King Dessa's Underworld Royal Palace. The army captain informed him that the only person capable of training Bojji was King Di Shah's younger brother Despa. Bojji and Kage reawakened their excitement and headed to see Despa right away. He decides to train Bojji, but not until Despa demanded a big sum of money from Bojji before admitting him. However, Despa's greed and vanity are easily forgiven because he is the first person to genuinely open up to Bojji about his powers and how he developed his own strength. But Despa is the first to tell him that he won't be able to train his way out of it. He'll have to find a way around it instead. That's how Bojji gets his first training montage, in which he honed his agility, endurance, and strength. Bojji endured weeks of intensive training at a day spa. When a Kage saw Bojji could effortlessly destroy a giant stone, the training results began to appear.
So once more, I have given my son.
In the past, Lady Miranjo takes the King Boss to the Red Devil because Boss wants to be the strongest warrior. According to the Devil, Boss must sacrifice something in order for the demon to accept their request. In addition to King Boss's age and life, the Devil demanded to have a child so that he may inherit the power of his firstborn offspring. Hilling, on the other hand, was devastated and outraged when he learned that Damaz had murdered Bojji. Hilling then resolved to execute Damaz and Hokuro, but just as the execution was about to begin, A king boss in the form of Data emerged and intervened, saying Bojji was still alive and training somewhere. Damaz and Hokuro were spared the death punishment and were only banished from the kingdom once Hilling recognized that the person in front of her was not Data, but rather King Boss. She started inquiring about Data's whereabouts. King Boss, who savagely answered that he died, made Hilling was stunned and then passed out. The next day, when Hilling was awake, she came to King Boss and asked him to return Data. Suddenly, Hilling heard the voice of Data, who was currently trapped in King Boss's chest. When Hilling was about to cut King Boss's chest, the head guard stops him, because after all, King Boss's current body is the body of Data. Elsewhere in the underworld, Bojji has completed his training with despised and is ready to face his foes. Because Bojji's sword was so little, Kage initially doubted his skill. Despised, on the other hand, noted that in addition to Bojji's ability to escape strikes from his opponents, he can also defeat them by striking their weak spots without taking their lives. Then they express gratitude to despised for all of his expertise and training. Kage invites Bojji back to the palace to settle the dispute. Bojji must now decide what to do. He could return to his kingdom, but he is scared of confronting the people who conspired to assassinate him. He also has lingering doubts about Queen Hilling's involvement, given that she sent him on the Damaz mission in the first place. Kage chastises him for his concerns, recalling the loss of his own mother and Queen Hilling's love and consideration for Bojji. Bojji becomes enraged with himself for disbelieving his stepmother and begins slamming his face against the wall as a kind of punishment. On the other hand, King Despised realized that his youngest brother named Owen had escaped from the underworld prison. King Despised deliberately locked his brother because Owen had made a pact with a demon to become immortal. Inside the kingdom, all the bandits arrived. The bandit leader Zaku is the most reasonable in that he puts his survival first and knows when he's in a losing situation. He's also skeptical of Miranjo because, like Levi's experience, he knows no one helps someone like him without an ulterior motive. The other two are Kingbo, who is shown said to be fallen royalty, and the fully armored Auken. After King Despised found out that Ukin was going to Boss's kingdom, King Despised decided to go with his troops to the palace and seize them all, along with the ringmaster Miranjo of Boss's kingdom. And it turned out to be true. Oken and some prisoners from the underworld prison had then captured King Boss, locked him in a dungeon. When Kingbo, the fallen king, kicks him off Boss's throne to declare himself the new ruler of the country, Auken retaliates without a word. He first slices the tendons in his hands and feet to render Kingbo immobile before stabbing him numerous times in the back. He follows this up by squatting near Kingbo's face, watches him die. He never talks or really exerts any other kind of emotion. The royal palace is currently under the authority of underworld prisoners. Bojji and Kage were helped by the underworld fighters from King Despised and taken directly to the boss's royal palace. Auken, who was in the middle of a killing rampage, stopped Bojji and the underworld soldiers. The leader of the underworld warriors is aware of Despised's advice not to allow Bojji face Auken because magic alone would be able to vanquish Auken. One of the commanders orders Bojji to go to the boss's palace first and guard Queen Hilling immediately. Bojji ran to the palace. He saw his first tutor, a two-headed snake who had always been with him, beaten by a giant named Gigan. Bojji immediately beat Gigan and requested his mother Hilling begin healing right away. Hilling was surprised to see Bojji's strength before she finally said that all her healing potions was finished. Fortunately, Kage stole few bottles of potions, using that and successfully healed the two-headed snake and several injured dogs. Bojji then protected his mother and resisted Gigan's attempts to kill him, ultimately triumphing. Even Gigan, who Bojji had just handily defeated, swore allegiance and turned loyal. Eventually, the hounds who had been used as the underworld's wards turned into Bojji's servants. Then, in order to prevent the troops of the underworld from invading the boss palace, the two-headed serpent gave Bojji the instruction to proceed immediately to the dungeon. On the other hand, lightning struck Auken while the leader of the underworld warriors and his army were fighting him. To halt Auken, King Despised used the lightning's magical power. As soon as Despised, who thinks that tying an immortal being is enough, ties him to the rope. In the meanwhile, the basement gate had already been used by King Despised and his soldiers to access the boss's palace. Bojji, with the help of Gigan, had also arrived at the dungeon at the same moment. When Gigan, who did not want to return to the underworld's jail, King Despised wanted to capture the culprit Miranjo, who had released the underworld lords and brought them to the boss's palace. He attacked the king in order to save his friend Gigan. Bojji swiftly prepared to fight King Despised. Despised unexpectedly sent a psychic message to King Despised telling him he would lose to Bojji. Despised persuaded King Despised to retire and let Bojji fight the king boss so that he could easily defeat Miranjo and the demon without suffering many casualties. King Dessa agreed after hearing the justification and was ready to go right away. Additionally, King Dessa asked Gigan and promised him a position as a warrior of the Underworld Kingdom if he agreed to go back to the Underworld Palace. King Dessa and the Underworld army returned to their kingdom after Gigan accepted the offer. Miranjo, on the other hand, has been apprehended by Underworld prisoners. She begins to send telepathic messages to Alkan, pleading to him to save her from the Underworld prisoners who have turned on her. When Alkan received the message from Miranjo, he immediately untied the rope from his body and dashed towards the palace. When Alkan arrived at the palace to save Miranjo, he happened to run into Bojji. Alkan intends to murder Bojji. The battle between Bojji and Alkan is inevitable, with Bojji jumping and dodging Alkan's precise slashes. And even though Bojji stabbed the sword into Alkan's body numerous times, he healed himself again and again. Bojji, realizing that Alkan was immortal, goes berserk and attacks Alkan, but is wounded and falls down, defeating even the commander of the Underworld army and Despised, who assisted Bojji. When he sees Alkan approaching, Cage desperately searches for something to do and transforms into a massive shadow that devours Alkan. But Alkan revives, piercing Kage's body with his sword, and Alkan mercilessly end the life of half-dead Bojji to death. The scene switches to the moment when Data, who is still imprisoned in King Boss's heart, find out him that Miranjo was once a child from the realm of magicians, where the inhabitants were the first people that bravely challenged the authority of the gods. He helped their community and overcame the wrath of the gods while he was lost in the wilderness and assisted by Miranjo's kind mother. And initially, everything went smoothly, until some of the locals formed an alliance with the gods to battle their fellow citizens. After that, the alliance killed Miranjo's mother and a 4-year-old Miranjo skinned, her hand chopped off and chained in middle of the Homa village. People there smiling and claimed it's justified. Out of anger, Boss killed them all and take her with him. Since then, Boss let go of his dream of becoming the world's strongest and decided to be on the side of Miranjo. He wanted nothing but to see her smile again. He starts to fall in love with her gradually. When they encountered a demon, Miranjo requested that the demon turn Boss the strongest human, at the expense of the boss's advanced age and the power of his firstborn child. The demon fulfilled his request. Because the first wife is unable to have any more children, Miranjo devised a scheme to utilize the child as a vessel for the boss's soul after his death. Later, she purposefully makes Boss marry Hilling. Data is upset with his father after viewing the past, but he feels terrible for Miranjo due to his belief that Miranjo could genuinely change for the better. Data made a pledge to her that he would protect her. Data's analysis proven to be correct. Miranjo witnesses everyone dying in agony. Her mother once advised her to base her happiness on the happiness of others. Miranjo, proving her kind heart, appears and miraculously heals Kage. At that moment, Despa and Bojji's consciousness sees all the difficulties Miranjo has faced throughout her life and is partially sent in between the land of death and the land of living. On the other side, Kage's mother was waiting for him. Miranjo immediately stops Kage to remind him of his best friend Bojji. To protect Bojji, Kage sees off her mother. The 4 guards, on the other hand, have arrived to fight Alkan. The fight begins, and no matter how hard they beat them, Alkan regains himself again and again. They eventually manage to rip Alkan's body apart, but that doesn't work either. So Alkan stabs everyone and watches them die slowly. Then, all of a sudden, King Boss joins the arena. The boss, with the healing power of Data, saves everyone from death. And then the boss, wielding his big mace, goes on a rampage against Alkan. But Alkan is immortal. King Boss devises a plan to compress Alkan's body into a tiny ball and seal him inside a large boulder, putting an end to Alkan's reign of terror. The King Boss approached Miranjo, who was in the magic mirror, and apologized for causing her so much pain. King Boss, who still has feelings for Miranjo, he very strongly declared that he would accompany Miranjo to heaven with him if he defeated in combat with Bojji. However, he was unaware that by resurrecting King Boss, Miranjo had broken her deal with the devil and her soul could not enter the afterlife. Once more, the egotistical self-centered King Boss threatened to kill anyone attempting to remove Data's body from his possession. Bojji, who still cares deeply for his little brother Data, decides to confront the King Boss. The other dignitaries supported Bojji, but Despa tells everyone that the only person who can fight King Boss without hurting Data's body is Bojji. Bojji and King Boss epic battle has finally begun. Initially, Bojji could only dodge the king boss's attacks while desperately searching for a weak spot. After some time, Bojji discovered king boss's weakness. Bojji destroys king boss mace by attacking its weak point, and within seconds, Bojji knocks king boss to the ground. Then he crawled over to Miranjo and tried to destroy the magic mirror so that Miranjo can go to the afterlife. Miranjo, seeing boss's sadness, chose to admit defeat and asked Bojji to destroy her magical mirror. After Bojji gracefully destroys the magic mirror, the souls of King Boss and Miranjo fly up, and the red demon appears and flies into the sky to devour Miranjo's spirit. Miranjo apologizes to King Boss for being unable to join the afterlife with him, and Miranjo was swallowed by the demon. A few seconds later, the red demon was struck by a thunderbolt sent by King Dese. The red demon was immediately decapitated by the commander of the underworld army, and Despa made an agreement with the red demon. In order to get his head back, the demon has to grant one wish. Data abruptly stated his request. Data wants the demon to resurrect Miranjo. Dato's request was immediately granted by the red devil, and Data has now kept his promise to protect Miranjo. Data announces his marriage to Miranjo and vows to make amends for her previous mistakes. Hilling, who saw her two beloved children survive, immediately hugged them both with joy. In the end, Miranjo has promised to change herself and become a better person. Finally, Data kneeled down before Bojji and handed over the royal throne to the rightful owner, Bojji, and from that day forward, Bojji has held the title of king in the Boss Kingdom.
Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more updates on how the story progresses further. Also, if you like us to cover more animes, please let us know which anime we should recap next in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe.